Let's continue exploring the tools across the top. We've seen the Smart tool. To the right of that is the scrubber. The scrubber simply scrubs whatever audio you've selected. On a trackpad, I can only go so far. If you've got a mouse, you can keep scrolling to the right and it will scrub everything that you've selected. Now, it's kind of cool to be able to do little stutter effects. It would be really neat if you could record that, but you can't because the timeline playhead can only be moving in one direction at a time. And once you put Pro Tools into record, it's going to record and not give you the option to stutter. If you had a second system, you could do that. There's a pencil here with lots of drawing options. They didn't just give us drawing in a straight line. They gave us freehand and all these different patterns. So we'll be able to do automation moves later on using some of these patterns. We'll also be able to just put notes into a MIDI track using the pencil. Don't even need a MIDI keyboard. That'll come in handy later on. Back to my Smart tool, I just don't feel anchored until my Smart tool is selected and I see those big blue buttons lit. So now on to the counters. This counter tells you where the cursor is at any given second. And you can change this counter and also add a sub counter so that you can compare the main and the sub. So right now the sub is in samples. I could show time code, get a frame-based rate of my time-based rate up above, or I could compare bars and beats to minutes and seconds. I changed the top one to bars and beats. Notice what happened here on the timeline ruler. That also changed to bars and beats. Whatever is your main counter is what you're going to see here across the top. So be careful what you're changing. If I want time and bars and beats, but I still want to reference mostly time, then I can change the sub to bars and beats. And this would tell me that at the 9-second mark, I'm in the middle of bar 6 at a given tempo. This tempo happens to be 120 BPM. So we'll use counters later on in other projects. I'm going to switch back and I'm going to hide the sub and just show hours, minutes, and seconds. Any clip that I've selected in the timeline has the start, the end, and the length selected automatically. So if I switch clips, I switch information. These counters come in very handy on pretty much every project, but especially when you're working in media, like advertising, and you have to be exactly 30 seconds or exactly 60 seconds, or you want a cue to happen at exactly 20 seconds. Over here is grid. We will cover this in great detail later, although I will tell you that if you don't have grid selected, you won't see these lines down here that pretty much emanate from the top counter. There's a line for 12, a line for 13, a line for 14. You switch back to bars and beats for a second. They're going to change when you get to bars and beats. So here's bar 7, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, bar 8, beat 1, beat 2. Back to minutes and seconds for now. If you don't want the grid lines, uncheck that box. But chances are, most of the time, you want to see them dripping down from the top through your region so that you can see where things happen. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. If I'm in slip mode and I get this piece almost to where I want it, just sort of right in there, but I really want it to be a little further to the right, I can do nudge values of a second down to a millisecond. So let's take half a second. On my laptop, I can use the comma and the period to nudge them, but only if I'm in keyboard focus, which is this little button right here. And then by tapping the period, I move to the right. By tapping the comma, I move to the left. If I switch back away from keyboard focus, the comma and the period aren't effective anymore. If you're on a full keyboard, you're going to want the plus and minus key on the very right side of your keyboard above the Enter key. So over there where you have your keypad with the numbers on it, the plus and minus over there are the one you want. Don't use the one above the brackets. You want the ones on the right. I've messed up my edit. I'm going to take shuffle and bring this piece back in to where it belongs. Just drop it back on the timeline. On the right, there are buttons that act as the transport. I happen to like playing using the space bar. There's your button. You can do most key commands without having to use these buttons. This is fairly new to Pro Tools. They gave us meters on the edit window, which is very handy because you can see if you're distorting right here without having to jump to a separate window. All of this is displayed by the choice of this button. So right now I don't have MIDI and synchronization displayed, and I don't have expanded transport displayed. I do have universe displayed, and I'm going to just turn that off and give myself more editing room still. There's one more thing to talk about up at the top. You'll see that the edit modes and the grid and nudge have handles on them. Those allow you to pick them up and drop them. You have to hold down Command. That's where they show up in default mode, but if you want to get fancy and rearrange your workspace, that's how you can do it.